Welcome everybody to another episode of Lockdown 23 in 1. That's right, today we are traveling down to Oregon to speak about an inmate by the name of David Ray Bartol. And I've done a few videos like this already in the past. We just started these in-depth stories on certain individuals. It shows the evolution of becoming a monster behind bars. This guy's the true definition, and what he did to an inmate at the end of the road is going to completely shock y'all. I mean, it shocked me. So let's get into it. But first, as always, if you're new to the channel and enjoy this content, all things lockup and crime related, then this is where you want to be. Hit that like, subscribe, notification bell before you leave, and check out my playlist with many more videos for you to start watching today. So like I said, we're going to be speaking about David Ray Bartol from Oregon. And as you can see by the mugshots, it starts off with him at a very young age. Clean face with no tattoos. But after almost 3 decades in the system, he ends up joining a white supremacist prison gang. As a matter of fact, this is a picture of him on the prison yard. I don't know what year, it looks like maybe early 90s. Posing next to former leaders of the neo-Nazi skinhead group Eastside White Pride. But Mr. Bartol was a part of an organization called The Brood, or as some people say, the Crude Rude Brood. And throughout time, they've been labeled as pretty much a white supremacist gang. But right here, it clarifies just a little bit on the whole situation. This is from one of the 4 individuals that started the whole organization. It says at 6'9", 290 pounds, it's no mystery how Portland, Oregon gang leader Sean Cutler came by the street name Sky. Yeah, I can see how that nickname came about. But he says, I could have been a monster on the NBA circuit. I had the size and the skills for it, but I took a different path. Cutler, 47, is one of the founders of Brood, a vicious gang with strong white supremacist undercurrents that's a growing threat in Portland. 30 years after Brood came to life, Cutler speaks of it as a gangland Dr. Frankenstein. Brood was never supposed to be what it's become. Cutler says, I don't condone in the crime being done in Brood's name today, or any of the white supremacist stuff. The whole thing's gone crazy. It's out of my control. Hell, it's out of anyone's control. It's a little upsetting. So just like many organizations, man, it starts off as one thing, one mission, and grows into something totally different. The leaders get older, they fall off, someone else takes up the power and kind of changes things along the way. I mean, some organizations, they wouldn't think in a million years when they first started that they have white guys running with them. Now they're all over the place, so everything changes just a little bit sometimes, or a lot with time. But one thing's for sure, the gang task force, the federales, deputies, whatever you want to call them, has labeled them as a white supremacist group. I'm not here to debate on whether or not they are. I'm just giving it to y'all how I'm reading it. So let's jump back over to Mr. Bartol and the situation in 2012 that led to a major investigation, multiple arrests, not to mention the gruesome death of an inmate inside of Marion County Jail. Despite their creed, which is love is law, Brood leaders and shot callers enforce harsh internal discipline on members who violate gang rules. At the time, a lot of these disciplines were being taken place at Tom's Auto Painting and Body Shop, located at the intersection of Southeast Powell Boulevard and the Southeast 85th Avenue, in the heart of Brood territory. The auto shop was co-owned by Brood enforcer David Corbett. He and other Brood officers tortured victims inside the shop's auto painting booth, which allowed for easy cleanup of blood and other body matter. Brood used the shop to manufacture illegal silencers, which gang members were test firing inside. Imagine you're going to get your tires rotated or an oil change. Hear some crazy sounds in the back. You think it's maybe an air drill or something. Nah, it's just a group of some Brood members test firing some suppressors. Man, that's crazy, man. Never even heard of people manufacturing these things. But in December 2012, Corbett and other Brood enforcers, including David Bartol, kidnapped gang member Nicholas Remington at gunpoint from his home and drove him to Tom's in the middle of the night. God, man, that guy probably heard all kinds of things about that place. Knows damn well he don't want to be carried there in the middle of the night. Remington was suspected of being a police informant. The Brood enforcers stripped him, beat him with baseball bats, used a belt sander to remove a Brood tattoo on his left shoulder, then put a motorcycle helmet on his head and shot it with a rifle 4 or 5 times. Next, they injected Remington in the neck with a cocktail of drugs that caused him to stop breathing. They dumped him unconscious, naked except for his boxer shorts, on the street about a mile away, but little did they know he would survive. 2 months later, Mr. Bartol and a few others kidnapped another man and tortured him inside this body shop. They dumped this individual on the street as well, unconscious with 2 gunshot wounds to the abdomen. Little did they know that he would survive as well. Now, Mr. Bartol's still on the streets ripping and running. He hasn't been arrested for the whole torture situation. A little bit of time goes by and he commits 2 more home invasions. It says 2 home invasion robberies he carried out in Salem, Oregon after the 2 tortures. During one robbery, Bartol shot a man in the chest. During the second robbery, he pointed a gun at the victim's forehead and asked him if he wanted to die, seconds before police arrived. And that situation will be the wrap of his life out in the streets. He ends up getting sentenced to 18 years for those 2 home invasions, right? Believe it or not, I mean, this guy's already been to prison, all kinds of stuff. He got spared. Now, this is where everything takes another turn. While he was in jail for those 2 home invasions, remember Remington from the first story, okay? After healing up from that torturous situation, he ends up breaking everything down to the detectives. Remington's account led to a multi-year, multi-agency investigation of Brood, dubbed Operation White Christmas. God, these operation names get me every time as well.
The sheriff's office says that they came to this home here at 7th and Cedar in Fairview after an investigation that has been ongoing for more than a year now into Operation White Christmas. Operation White Christmas, we told you about it last month too when the sheriff's office did a SWAT raid recently. It is an investigation into white supremacy gangs, also gun trafficking, drug trafficking. So the sheriff's office this morning says that investigation still very active. We know that there have been more than 40 indictments, federal indictments linked to Operation White Christmas. The sheriff's office says this is a high priority for them. They want to tackle this because these organizations, these white supremacy gangs, are trafficking guns and drugs throughout Multnomah County.
I've lived here for 14 years and it progressively has gotten worse.
For more than 5 years, neighbors at East Burnside and Southeast 83rd have lived in fear.
I knew that I was never comfortable around them.
That feeling still exists today, even after an early morning search warrant brought out the SWAT teams.
I knew that I didn't really even want to make eye contact with them, and I think that's kind of how the neighborhood feels about them.
We talked to at least 5 different people, all of whom live near these 2 homes, and yet no one wanted to go on camera because they are still fearful of potential retaliation from the people associated to these 2 homes.
Well, they're both white supremacist gangs.
Lieutenant Steve Alexander.
So far, we've recovered several firearms, including handguns and a sawed-off shotgun.
Deputies say this crime organization is linked to a much bigger picture of Operation White Christmas.
Well, it's important because they're because of the firearms trafficking and the drug dealing they're doing. It's a high-level gang activity in the metro area, and we're hopeful that we can make an impact with the investigation as we continue, and that's why we continue to pursue it.
Now remember, Mr. Remington was the first victim to get tortured, and it's said that his account or his statement led to all these investigations. As soon as they found out that he survived, they probably thought in the back of their head, it's probably game over. Also, they thought that Remington was a police informant, so possibly if their assumptions were correct, he's been giving intel up for a long time, so maybe this was all cooking already to begin with. But like the article said, his account started everything and hundreds of people got arrested. Many going to prison and a lot of people getting a felony for their first time. Starting their criminal career with Operation White Christmas. Can't stop saying it, man. It gets me every time. Now let's jump back to Mr. Bartol in Marion County Jail. Keep in mind, he got locked up for the 2 home invasions, got sentenced to 18 years. He's probably thinking to himself, man, 18 piece, I could do that. Still has a little bit of hope of getting back on them streets. But a short time after that 18-year sentence, Mr. Remington is opening up to all the detectives, and that's when Mr. Bartol gets indicted for those torturing situations at the body shop. And if I were to guess, you know, when you get indicted in jail, they call your name, you go down to booking, which is usually attached to the jail, get all your paperwork that lists all the felonies, and then you try to get a bond. But in his case, he's already doing 18 years. So he gets his paperwork. He's going back up to the pod. When he gets there, he has a plan. It says that Mr. Bartol was furious that his co-conspirator was talking to investigators. And since he was in protective custody, he couldn't do nothing to him. So he decided to lash out on a random inmate. This is Mr. Cecil. he was sitting in the day room, minding his business doing a 30-day sentence for contempt of court, and has no idea that Mr. Bartol is plotting to kill him in a random, unprovoked attack. Man, this guy was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Bartol braided threads from his uniform together and used it to saw through a plastic tote bin and form a shank. He sharpened the shank by rubbing it against concrete and dipping it in his toilet bowl. The next morning he wrote, "It's a good day for a bitch to die." According to reports, Bartol walked up to Cecil, who was just watching TV in the jail's day room, when he hit him in the jaw with a stolen flashlight from a deputy. Then he uses that shank that was dipped in the toilet and stabs him repeatedly in the left eye. Bartol takes off his shower shoe, uses it as a hammer, and finishes the job, pushing the shank deeper into his eye. Cecil was immediately taken to the hospital, but unfortunately 5 days later, he died. After all this took place, Bartol wrote a note saying this was a free kill for my trophy room. And that's something that actually happens very frequently. When people think they're going home and then all of a sudden they get indicted right before they leave, or, they go to sentencing and come back with 40 to life. A lot of guys come back so mad that they're ready to kill something. Anything and anyone needs to pay for all this bad news they got today. Now, this is just what the article is saying what happened. I don't know exactly if there's some maybe, inmate rumors running around. I'm sure anybody that might have been locked up around that time in Marion County Jail would know a little more about this situation than I do. So please, by all means, let us know in the comments section below. Now, Mr. Bartol, he was doing 18 years for the 2 home invasions, ended up getting 55 years for the torture situations, and they were ran consecutive. And then he ends up getting sentenced to death for the killing of Mr. Cecil, which blows my mind that he was even in a pod with Mr. Bartol. 30 days for contempt of court, man, makes no sense. He should have been in like a green band, man, somewhere down there where nobody's even thinking about throwing a fist. But Mr. Bartol's story is not over yet, okay? Even though he was sentenced to death, it looks like it got overturned. Turns out somewhere in the law it changed to the point where the murder that he committed wasn't a capital murder anymore. So he's doing life in prison, and right now he's at Snake River Correctional Institution. And you can tell by the long rap sheet here, the majority of his game-ending charges took place between 2013 and 2016. 2022 here for the murder. But it didn't happen in that year. It happened while he was in jail. It probably just took a few years for the system to charge him. He was already doing like 70 years, so he wasn't going nowhere. But look at all of his alias names. He has quite a bit of them. Gremlin, Phillips, Kelly, Bartol, first names David, Gremlin, Michael, Donnie, middle name Ray, Lee, James, Tatalik. And while I was reading all this, I realized his nationality. Like we talked about in the beginning, one of the co-founders of Brood said that none of this was supposed to be a white supremacist type of group, but it has transformed into that over time. And if I were to guess, just judging by these photos, Mr. Bartol's been with these guys close to the beginning. At the time on the yard, he was a shot caller for Brood and seen how all this unfolded, but he's technically, at least in this prison database, American Indian or Alaskan Native. I guess that right there in itself tells you that you ain't gotta be white to be a part of this group. I don't know, y'all can let me know your assumptions in the comment section below. I learn from y'all all the time, y'all learn from me, we all learn together. It's like ABC Mouse over here. But that's a wrap to Mr. David Ray Bartol, and a prime example of what I like to call a career gangbanging criminal. Some people love that life, man, and they don't care if it's a death of them. Mr. Bartol, if you're to ask me, is definitely one of those guys. When you really start digging into some of these individual stories, man, it's just unbelievable the stuff that they go through. I don't feel sorry for them. It's just, crazy. Almost a fictional story. If someone were to have randomly told me these stories in the cell block, man, I don't know if I would have believed them. Also, it just blows my mind because there's so many gangs and organizations I've never heard of out there. Everybody's starting up their own little things, seems like. But I said it a million times and I'll say it again, man. The gang life ain't for nobody. Unless you enjoy the benefits, which is prison and the possibility of death at an early age. If that's for you, then go right ahead. Enjoy yourself while it lasts. But I'm out of here, ladies and gentlemen. If you enjoyed, like I said, hit that like, subscribe, notification bell before you leave. And stay tuned. I got plenty more content coming your way. We are jumping back into the women's pod once again here very soon.